Another year, another free agency where the Packers might not do much and we all sit here and cry while all the other players go to other teams, but maybe not. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Did that in one take, Grossi, and today we are going to be breaking down 5 potential prospects for the Green Bay Packers to target during free agency. Free agency is set to kick off this week. That's right, the tampering period begins tomorrow. There's already been some talks about some trades. Mac Jones is going all the way over to Jacksonville. You got Jerry Jeudy. He's getting traded to the Browns. And yes, there is potential the Packers actually make some moves. And this is because, of course, you have the raising in the cap, which really helped. But the Packers definitely have some holes that they need to address. That's what she said. For example, with A.J. Dillon likely leaving, they're going to need to address running back. They need to look at inside linebacker because Devondre Campbell is set to be released as well. And there's definitely some areas where they can improve. Now, I imagine the majority of those are going to be addressed during the draft. But here, I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers make 1 or 2 big moves. And so, let's get started with number 5. Starting things off with Cameron Curl, the safety who is currently on the Washington Commanders, who is set to be a free agent. Now let's talk a little bit about Curl. There is still potential that he winds up re-signing with the Commanders. He is a very solid player. Currently 24 years old, had 5 passes defended in 2023, 115 tackles. And the biggest reason why I think he could potentially sign with the Packers is because he's going to be relatively cheap. Now, talking to Commanders fans and watching some of his tape, he seems to be well-liked in Washington and one of the better players in that secondary. However, I wouldn't describe him as a true game changer. This feels like a move where the Packers would either grab somebody else in free agency at the safety position or draft high on a day 1 or early day 2 pick and get somebody in the secondary at safety, and then you would have Curl to provide some depth there, and you know that he would be a solid piece back there. The Packers, as we know, are very about getting the best deal possible. I mean, hell, look at Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell when we signed him, or Adrian Amos when we signed him, right? Basically taking a shot at a depth piece who could potentially emerge as a starter. Here, Curl is definitely a starter, and I think could provide some much needed depth in that secondary, and so I wouldn't be too surprised if the Packers were taking a look at him. Number 4, you got Blake Cashman, who was signed with the Houston Texans last year. Currently 27 years old, had 5 passes defended, 106 tackles in 2023. And Cashman's one of those guys similar to Curl. I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans do re-sign him. However, they may be looking to upgrade at that position, looking at a Patrick Queen, for example. And Patrick Queen is going to command a ton of money. Cashman, I think, would be a really solid signing. I think he's going to make a decent amount of money in free agency. The only concerns I have are with injury. That's where I think that price may be driven down a little bit. But with Devondre Campbell set to be released, the Packers definitely need some depth here. Quay Walker is great, and I think he's going to do really, really well this season. McDuffie was a solid piece last season, but the Packers definitely need to address this position. And whether it's going to be in the draft or in free agency, Cashman could be that guy for some relatively good value. Number 3, taking a look at the safety position again, you got Jordan Fuller, who was signed with the LA Rams, has been with the Rams for a bit, currently 25 years old, had 8 passes defended in 2023, 94 tackles, a former 6th round pick, and he has some connections with our new defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, as he played with him in Ohio State. So this would not be the most unlikely reunion because Jeff Hafley has very high praise for Fuller. And Fuller, who's been a leader for the Rams and has played pretty damn well, I think he's worth taking a look at. I don't think he's going to break the bank considering how many safeties are currently free agents, but I think with that connection that he has with Hafley and how solid of a player he is, like I said, the Packers just need bodies back there and they need some depth. So I think the connection with Hafley, what he's put on the field so far, is definitely warranting a look, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers decide to take a shot on him. Number 2, and this one was a tough one. I'm going back to linebacker here. We're going with Jordan Brooks from Seattle. And this is why this one's a little bit tough, because there are some things that Brooks does very, very well, and I love watching his tape. And then there's other things where I'm like, oh, those missed tackles are a bit of a problem. So he's an off-the-ball linebacker who I think is going to command some decent money in free agency. He tore his ACL in January of 2023 and still played last season. He's currently 26, and I wouldn't say that he's had elite play, but he's a very solid guy. He got a run defense grade of 61.1, and he was 16th out of 52 for qualified linebackers last year in pass coverage, which is something the Packers definitely need. And again, you need depth at linebacker, especially going to 4-3. The only issue besides some injury concerns is the missed tackles, because he definitely missed some. He had 21 missed tackles last year, which was considerably high. So Brooks, I feel like his upside is pretty significant. He's another guy I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle winds up re-signing. But right now, the Packers have that need at linebacker. They need somebody who can play pass coverage, and Brooks could be that guy. It's just going to depend on how much money he's going to command in this free agent market and if the Packers are going to be willing to pay it. And number one, a signing I could see the Packers definitely doing, it would be a splashy signing, and it would definitely address a huge need at safety. And that would be Xavier Mckin, the 24-year-old who, of course, been playing for the New York Giants. And the reason why McKinney is at the top of my list is because he's not a stopgap. With a bunch of these guys, you go, okay, they're younger, they're under 30, right? That's something that Packers definitely want to look at, and they would go for relatively cheap. McKinney is going to command a pretty sizable contract, potentially one of the biggest in terms of all the safeties that are currently available. But McKinney is not a guy that you just go, okay, he's there for a year or two, and then you wind up drafting his replacement. This is a guy who could play in the backfield for a while. Had 11 passes defended in 2023, 3 interceptions. He played over 1,100 snaps last year and garnered 116 tackles combined, which is pretty damn impressive. So besides being a great player, there's also a connection with Green Bay with Derek Ansley, who is the Packers DB coach. He was a coach in Alabama when Xavier Mckin was playing. Granted, Xavier Mckin admitted, yeah, we haven't talked in a while, but there could be a reunion there. But ultimately, this would be the signing I would love the Packers to do because it would address the position, and the Packers could still address safety in the draft later on, or they can go get a guy like Cameron Curl. Because if the Packers are going to make a splashy move, I think it's gonna be at safety. Yeah, there's talks about bringing in a potential running back, but I think they'll just address that in the draft. And here, I think McKinney would check a ton of boxes. He can play all over the field. And yes, he is gonna cost a decent amount of money, but to just have that confidence in the safety position that you have your guy back there, I think that's gonna be worth the price tag. And that's why I would absolutely love this signing. Now, before we get out of here, there are some other players I want to bring up very quickly. I don't think the Packers are going to sign them, but they are on the radar. Of course, you have Justin Simmons, the 31-year-old safety from Denver, just got released and is a fan favorite over in Denver. And I love the player, 100%. And if he takes a team-friendly deal, then I'm all about it. The issue is, of course, he is a bit older. He's 31, and in a couple years, you are going to need to replace him. However, Simmons could provide that veteran experience that is much needed in a depleted safety room, and so it would not be the worst signing. I just don't know if the Packers are going to put out that kind of money for him. Besides safety, if you want to look at some other linebackers as well, you have Azeez Al-Shaair, who is 26 years old. Al-Shaair just spent a year with the Titans. He originally was on the 49ers. He led the team in tackles last year, and yeah, his tape is just a lot of fun to watch. The only issue I have is that he's going to command a decent amount of money, and I don't know if the Packers are going to be willing to pay that, but Al-Shaair is definitely a name to keep your eye on. In addition, you could look at Frankie Louvu from the Panthers, 27 years old, 5 passes defended last season, 125 tackles. He is going to command a bunch of money in free agency as well, and I think this would go a long way in addressing the linebacker position, but I do want to also mention, don't be surprised if the Packers go for linebackers that are going to be super duper cheap because they just need depth for the 4-3 scheme they're planning on running, and Louvu might just be out of their price range. And finally, just to address the offense, just to give them some love, I wouldn't be surprised if the Green Bay Packers took a look at Curtis Samuel. He's currently 27, was just on the Commanders, and he puts up some decent numbers. However, they have some good receivers already on that roster, and Curtis Samuel is kind of just the odd one out, and I don't think they're going to pay him a ton of money. I just think with a young wide receiver room, Curtis Samuel, for the right price, wouldn't be the worst guy to take a flyer on. You look at other guys like Gabe Davis, who provide that deep threat, even a Calvin Ridley, but who knows what the hell his contract is going to look like. I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers took a look at some wide receivers and said, hey, we can bring in a veteran presence for relatively cheap that could address wide receiver as well, because maybe there's concerns with Christian Watson and injuries. But I don't imagine the Packers going after offense too much in free agency because the defensive side of the ball definitely needs to be addressed. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you have the Green Bay Packers signing? Of course, this week I'll be all up to date with all the Packers signings and all the crazy free agency news. So stay tuned. It's going to be a crazy one. But let me know. You guys saw me at Tom Grossi Comedy. All social media see down below. A big shout and thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.